Well, it's the Vuelta España 2025, stage 4, and I'm standing on French soil after 3 days in Italy. We're making our way through France and onto the homeland of Spain. Today, the celebration of a home rider, a Frenchman, David Gaudu, taking the red leader's jersey off of Jonas Vingegaard, and stage victory here in Voiron. Well, that goes to Big Ben Turner from Team Ineos, who had this awesome lead out from his teammate, former world champion Mikel Kwiatkowski, delivering up the final 350 meters there behind the lead out of Ed Plancart, who is working for Jasper Philipsen. And Philipsen was no match for Big Ben, powering up to the finish line to take victory. Philipsen would have to settle for second. Plancart held on for third place on the day, and behind them, was another British rider, Ethan Vernon, who was a little bit boxed out at one point by Big Ben Turner. And no, not Mads Pedersen up in the mix today. You have to go down to sixth place behind the Arkea rider of Beermans, 206 kilometers thereabouts, as we left Italy from Susa over the Mont Genève, over the Lotharet, and then 130 kilometers downhill and flat to get to the finish here. Not much was going to happen. We thought perhaps Lidl Trek would try to churn the screws on Jasper Philipsen to make things difficult for him, to give an advantage to the stronger rider of Mads Pedersen, but that didn't happen. Instead, we had a little bit of a steady eddy. We had an escape form with 5 riders, including Louis Vervaeke, also Sean Quinn, the EF Education Easy Post rider, former U.S. champion who was in the escape yesterday. Well, he was there again today, and he was the last of that 5-man group to survive, going free after the second climb to Lotharet, solo for some time, and then they were swept up. We had that intermediate sprint where, importantly, Mads Pedersen did pick up the intermediate sprint victory there to earn himself points in the points competition, to now have the points jersey as we're going into stage 5, the TTT tomorrow. Had some other action. We had Fernandez from Burgos attack. We had Bruno Armorai attack from Decathlon Mondial, but it was steady eddy as we're coming in here to what was a hectic finale. And I want to break this down because there was roundabouts, road furniture, all sorts of chaos before we got to the finish line. In fact, we saw a crash at a bottleneck point where riders were squeezed through, and I can't believe they're racing on all these small streets in cycling at the World Tour level in one of the 3 major tours, but here we are. Bottleneck crash. Jay Vine goes down off on the left. We see a rider there. Yes, it was Kiwi rider George Bennett down on his bike, and he took the longest to get up. Thankfully, our old friend George Bennett was back on his bike and going, and I got some footage of him here at the finish line afterwards. Blood on his left knee and his back jersey ripped up, his hip ripped up as well. Later, his team was leading out Ethan Vernon through all the dangerous curves that we had in the final 3 kilometers. They gave a 5-kilometer rule today, so the GC riders could hang 10 and just chill out coming into the finish line as much as you can chill out on a day like today. In fact, it seemed like Jonas Vingegaard didn't want to be up there in the mix, and also was thinking about trying to keep his red jersey in the closet, because if he's not in the red leader's jersey, that means he can wear his own TTT, his own time trial skin suit in the team time trial tomorrow. And so he eased up, and we saw David Gaudu, the Frenchman, fighting tooth and nail to be up there, because all he had to do was be about 6 or 7 positions ahead of Vingegaard, 2-time Tour de France champion. And it was down to positioning because they were at the same time on the GC after Gaudu's stage victory in stage 3 yesterday in Italy, and Gaudu did enough to do that. But now let's focus our attention on that sprint lead out. Arkea for Beermans were doing a lot of the lead out. We also saw the boys from Alpecin really powering through all these roundabouts and turns, getting really hectic. We saw at one point riders touching wheels, locking up, easing off. At another point, we saw a DSM rider up on the curb, up on the sidewalk, not by choice because he was squeezed up there, popping back down, back into the group. And then getting into these final turns, we saw Pedersen, we saw Turner fighting for that position into the final, I think it was right-hand turn before this left-hand turn, leading right here behind me to the final punch, 350 meters up to the line. Now, coming out of that last turn, Plancart leading the way, but we had Kwiatkowski, who was really positioning Turner to be in spot position where he needed to be to give the challenge, and you wouldn't have imagined it, but Turner up there often doing the work for some of his team leaders like Egan Bernal, who's here in the race, but today he pulled off his biggest ever victory, and he came into this race, he left the Renui Tour. He had to get special dispensation from the governing body to pull out of another stage race while it's still going on to start a different stage race, in this case the Vuelta a España, and it was a success because here he is, stage victory. Pulled out of that race, came into this race, didn't quite work out for him in the earlier sprint days that we had for him, and yesterday we saw the team going for the Italian on home soil in his home region of Piemonte, Filippo Top Ghana. Today, though, it was the day for Big Ben Turner, shooting up here to the line, really playing it smart and not afraid to bump shoulders with those top dogs. Philipsen, Pedersen in his wake. We're gonna have to get the lowdown on what happened there, but I spoke with Spaniard stage winner in the Giro d'Italia, teammate of Pedersen from Lidl-Trek, and he said as the race goes on, it gets harder, Pedersen will rise to the top, and I believe he's right on that. Carlos Verona said that. Now Pedersen has the points jersey. He's gonna be working on keeping up there day after day, and we'll see some of these other riders drop out, and Pedersen will get those victories. Don't you worry, similar to what we saw in the Giro d'Italia. Also spoke immediately with Jasper Philipsen. He was dousing water on his head. He looked up and watched the replay on the screen, was shaking his head, and he said, look, something's off. I didn't feel good today. I didn't feel good. He said that a couple times, and he got washed away in the sprint. That was clearly the win for Ben Turner. He couldn't even come up and match Ben Turner. He was trying. Ben Turner got the jump. He was going up and up, but couldn't do it because Ben Turner here on the right-hand side, as we're going up to the line, on the lead out of Ed Plancart, he got the jump on Jasper Philipsen, and Jasper Philipsen is chasing Ben Turner down, could never do so, and there we saw the wobble of Ethan Vernon trying to keep things upright. Clean sprint. Turner gets the victory, the biggest victory for the British rider in his career. I think he's around 26 years old, and he's gonna love this. As the riders are boarding the flight from here in France, they're gonna fly, I think it's to Girona. They're flying out of the Grenoble airport. They're gonna fly to Girona, land there, get some rest tonight. We got a late team time trial, so if you're watching in Canada, make sure to tune in live and on demand on FloBikes, but it's gonna be a little bit later, so you can sleep in a little bit. TT, David Gaudu in the red leader's jersey for Team Groupama, and Ben Turner at the end of stage 4, stage victory at the 2025 Vuelta a España.